This is the Awful Announcing Podcast. Here's your host, Brandon Contes.
Alrighty, welcome to episode 19 of the Awful Announcing Podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Contes, and this week we have a former NFL quarterback who got paid a lot more per touchdown in his career than Tom Brady did, and now he's a full-time media member. Chase Daniel joins us. Chase, thanks so much for taking some time to come on the podcast today, but before we dive into your media ventures, are you retired from the NFL?
I wouldn't say retired. Retired's not the right word. Everyone wants to say it like that. I would say that right now I'm just not on a team. However, am still a full-time media member now with my NFL Network job, multiple podcasts that we can talk about a little bit later. But as of right now, no. We actually got a couple calls last week just checking in. Hey, how's the arm? Is he too old? Is he too fat? Is he staying in shape? All that kind of stuff. The normal check-ins. So I turned 37 in October. Still feel like I'm a 30, maybe 28-year-old young lad. So I feel pretty good. But right now, not officially retired. But if I do retire, I might have to give it to you guys first.
Oh, I appreciate that. Will you attempt to stay in game shape throughout the entire season? Like, is that is that or is there going to be a point where you just kind of don't have to prepare anymore and assume that you're not going to play this season?
Yeah, it's a good question. I still throw the football in the backyard every once in a while, and I'm still staying in really good cardio shape, keeping the arm in shape. But I would definitely say it's not like I have been doing in the past. So it's been a little bit different training regimen. My training regimen right now is getting 3 kids out the door to school in time before 8:15 a.m. with 3 different drop-offs. So the mornings around here are really busy. We're sweating. We're trying to get everything done. But then we get about 3 or 4 hours of just, my wife and me just hanging out, relaxing, doing a lot of this. So it's been good. It's been good. But the arm's definitely still in shape. Feel like I can still sling it a little bit.
So then how much is it about you finding the right opportunity if you were to play again, as opposed to just finding any opportunity?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's got to be the right fit. I'm not just going to go and just play for anyone. Although it's an extreme. I'm extremely grateful that I've been able to play 14 years right in the National Football League, and it's been really strategic every single step along the way that we've taken, my agent and I. So it's not just, hey, we want to go here. It's the most money. This is going to put me in the best light. This is the best situation. This is the best offense. And so that's sort of where I'm at in my career. And 2 years ago, after we sort of asked for our release from Detroit, we built the house in San Diego. And so we're San Diego full time. And I'm like, hey, listen, let's just wait. I'm not in any rush. We don't need to rush into signing with the team. But then my offensive coordinator, Joe Lombardi from the Saints, he got the offensive coordinator job with the LA Chargers, which they're not really in LA, they're in Orange County. It was an hour drive. It's the closest possible team that we could get. I was there for 2 years, had a great 2 years. So looking sort of somewhere out West Coast if something were to happen. But I will say that I've been really happy with sort of transitioning. Not a lot of guys have gotten the opportunity, especially this year in the sports media landscape. It's been the craziest year in quite some time. Everyone heard about the Disney layoffs. Everyone heard about ESPN cutting people. NFL Network's not really hiring. I was able to get into the door there because I worked as a guest analyst last year. Fox, really the only big hire there was Mark Ingram, who's my guy. They didn't hire anyone new on the NFL. CBS hired Matt Ryan and JJ Watt. So it's like, okay, those are Hall of Fame type guys, which is amazing. But you look at everyone else, there's usually more hires than that. There was none of that this year whatsoever. It was just the big guys. And so I'm really just grateful and lucky to be able to bring my expertise to the NFL Network. I'm really excited to be working for them.
I'm curious with backup quarterbacks. Like, you earned more than $40 million in your 14-year career through just 9 touchdown passes. And like, that's not an insult. That, like, clearly NFL
I don't
teams,
take it as one.
Yeah, they saw that there was value in having you around as their backup. But I am curious, do you look at your NFL career and feel like your talent was realized, or do you look at your NFL career and think you could have led a team and you just didn't get the opportunity to do it?
Yeah, I mean, there's a little bit of both. I mean, everyone goes into the NFL like just hoping to succeed, hoping to just get another year, right? Like just continue to stack years, especially being undrafted like I was. There's just not a lot of undrafted guys that have had the career that I've had in terms of years. And a lot of that I think comes down to two things. Like only had 5 or 6 starts in my entire career, but those starts and the times that I've been able to play because of injury, I've played really well. And I played really well. And most of those times that I played really well were on contract years. And I played really well throughout my entire career in the preseason. And that's why I'm like, the preseason matters. Maybe not for first, second round picks, but for the guys that are right on the line of the roster, the 6th round, the 7th round, the undrafted rookies, it really matters. So I was a little bit perturbed when the NFL went to 3 preseason games, because that 4th preseason game, you got 2 or 3 guys that are vying for a spot, whether it be special teams, a backup quarterback battle, the 5th receiver job, the 10th O lineman job, so forth and so on. So it's been quite the ride for us to be able to do that.
Are there other Tom Brady's that just never got the chance to start? Maybe like to a lesser extent than Brady, but backups who could have become stars or Super Bowl winners with the right coach, the right team, if their starter got hurt or something happened, and that opportunity just never happened for those players?
Well, I definitely think so. And you look at literally Brock Purdy, okay, Mr. Irrelevant. I've always been really high on him, but Mr. Irrelevant, he goes into camp as the number 3, okay, and nothing's expected of him. He's out there working on his own, and as a number 3 quarterback, there's not like a lot of people don't realize, like, the number 3 quarterback does not get reps. You get no reps, not even scout team, maybe a few scout team reps if the backup quarterback who runs the scout team is feeling lucky that day and be like, you can go ahead and get in there, feeling nice or whatever. And so he didn't get any reps. Like, he didn't. So you have Trey Lance as the opening day starter, cracks his ankle in half. You have Jimmy G hurt out for this. And then all of a sudden Brock Purdy comes in and just lights it up. I mean, that's the situation that we're in, is like a lot of people don't understand, like, in the NFL, it's all about opportunity, and you may only get one opportunity. It may not be other opportunities that exist. So if you get your opportunity in the NFL, you better play, and you better play well, and you better hold on to that job. And I say the biggest, and I've said this before, the biggest thing for quarterbacks especially is availability. You have to be available for your team every single Sunday or Monday to go out there, even if you're not 100%. A perfect example last year is Justin Herbert. His ribs were messed up on so many levels. He missed one snap the entire year. That's the type of toughness you got to have in this league for an NFL quarterback.
So with your media stuff, you have the podcast with Trey Wingo. We'll get to that. And then what's your exact role with NFL Network this season?
Yeah, so I'm an NFL Network Total Access analyst. So I'm on Total Access every single Friday, and there might be some Tuesdays. So they totally revamped their show, meaning the look, the feel. Like we took off the ties that we had on last year. We're just trying to be more relaxed. So Total Access is Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday. I'm the Friday guy, and it's just me and Mike Yam and Brian Baldinger on remote. So it's just me and Yammer in the studio. And so it's really cool to see our relationship, especially because I worked with him last year, really grow. And he's going to lean a lot on me for analyst role, and I'm going to lean a lot on him as well to have his hosting duties. So it's been pretty cool. We're going to do a lot of breakdowns. That's what I feel really comfortable on. That's what I know about football. And I'm also just going to give you my honest thoughts. And that's something that I told NFL Network, and that's something that I told everyone when I did the big rounds of interviews for every major network. I said, hey, look, I'm not going to be anyone else but Chase Daniel. That's the only person I know how to be. I'm going to be the same person on the camera as I am off the camera, because if I'm not, then first of all, it calls in to affect my authenticity. That's something to me that I really want to stick, that I really want people to know, hey, this same Chase, he's the same guy at car drop-off at our kids' school as he is on NFL Network, but he's just teaching me football. And that's something that really was important to me. And every executive that I talked to was like, that's exactly what we want you to be, because everyone else is taken.
Were you able to be that honest personality when you were doing NFL Network work while still playing?
I think that I probably, I mean, yeah, look at my first look at my first show ever on NFL Network. It was the first game of the Nathaniel Hackett era. And the clock management was just so bad as a player. I like literally my first ever, I mean, we can find it and I'll send it to you guys, but my first ever on air was like, hey, what did you guys, because it was the Monday night show, we were reacting to what happened, and I just sort of tore into them. And after the segment, I sort of like blacked out, but I just was like, hey, like, this is what I really feel. And as soon as we went to break the first one, all three hosts were like, yo, like, you know what you just did? And I'm like, I don't care. That's exactly how I feel. And they were like, yeah, like loving it. So I think I, for the most part, spoke my mind. I think there were certain times, maybe when I'm talking about the Chargers or maybe the Saints or maybe the Chiefs, that I was like, let's just, maybe not telling my exact truth, because I have a lot of friends in league circles. And that's something too, that even now when I made a promise to myself. I said, I'm not going to be the one that craps on other players or other coaches. Like, they have enough pressure on them. There's enough media out there that's going to do that. What I want to do is bring to light the good things, the struggles, the positive type things that I can really draw from. And I know news loves negativity. And obviously when something calls for it, I might do it in a way that might not seem as abrasive as some, but I still will call it how I see it.
Did you ever have a teammate or even an opponent, a player, a coach, somebody complain about something that you said on air?
No, never. And that's honestly like one of the cool things, is because being with the Chargers, working as a full-time analyst. I mean, I was in every single Monday. It was a full-time player, full-time analyst. And it wasn't just, hey, show up on Monday and you're good to go and just give us your thoughts. It was, hey man, I was up there at 2 p.m. We had a production meeting at 3. Okay. The game started at 5 and we'd watch the entire game together and we'd go on at night. It was a full day. And I didn't know anything about anything with TV. Like, hey, what's the A block? What's the B block? My wife is a Mizzou journalism major, and she's like, hey, this is what you're to be expected. But it was like learning on the job as I went.
Were there similarities in terms of the preparation that you would do as a player compared to that of an analyst?
Well, I think so. I think what stood out to me the most was that I knew these teams like the back of my hand, because I'm sitting in preparing for other games, and there's some carryover, right? So if you're a quarterback and you're in the building on Tuesday and you're watching, 4 or 5 games of your next opponent, there's going to be some carryover. Hey, we're like, say the Chargers were playing the Chiefs, okay, and I'm studying all Chiefs film, and Monday Night Football is Atlanta. Hey, I got to watch Atlanta this past week because Atlanta played the Chiefs. So there was a lot of carryover, if that makes sense. So I was able to study. And honestly, my biggest thing was like, I know these teams like the back of my hand. So it was more so reacting to what had happened in the game. And that's where I feel like I really excel. Now this new role is like, hey, you got to talk and know about all 32 teams. So I'm still trying to figure out my process on how to prepare, how to watch these games. I was, in my little man cave, I had all 8 early games on 2 TVs, because the NFL Sunday Ticket, I really liked the flow of that, and was just being able to take notes. I got a few producers texting me, hey, what are your thoughts on so we're still trying to figure out the thought process behind everything, but I think it's been pretty good so far.
There was so much made of Tony Romo his first year as an analyst, the way he was able to predict plays before, and just watching the way teams were lined up on the field and kind of predict what was going to happen. And a lot of it came true. So I'm just curious, being that you know these teams and know the players and systems so well, because you were so recently involved in playing it in these systems. Is that something that, like, if you were a game analyst, do you think you would be able to do that similarly?
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's something that I'm really open to. I'm really open to maybe figuring out, do I want to do just studio? Do I want to do some in-game analyst stuff? And I really like in the in-game analyst stuff to exactly being a quarterback and exactly preparing like one. You got to watch both offense and defense of both teams. 4 or 5 games. You have all these notes that you're taking. It's a little bit more in depth, but also you're reacting on the fly, which is something I feel like I'm really good at. But I also feel like I'm really good in studio in terms of just telling it how it is, analyzing it. So your mom at home or your dad at home or your mother-in-law at home can understand what the game of football is. I want to be a teacher of football while also understanding that, hey, what I put out there is my brand, and I want my brand to be authentic.
Did you speak to any networks about doing game analyst stuff?
I did. Yeah. I interviewed with all 4 major networks, did auditions for all 4 major networks, and it all got really good feedback. And I think the biggest takeaway was just like, look, this year is such a different year. It seems like even though the NFL is making almost $12 billion, every major network that's paying $2 billion for these rights are cutting back jobs and cutting back money and cutting back hires. And that's totally fine. I think it's actually awesome because, I mean, with an in-game analyst thing, if you're on the NFL, you're traveling 20 weeks in a row out of the year. And that's fine because we traveled like that every single year for the last 14 years of my life. So I think this first year, staying at home, it's really, really good for me personally as far as family time to be, hey, look, on Tuesdays, I'm in this office and I got 3 or 4 things I'm going to knock out virtually. On Wednesdays, I got one show with The Athletic. And then on Fridays, I'm up all day in LA doing the show. So it's a little bit more time with the family, which I'm really thankful for because the family has sacrificed a lot in terms of time, in terms of my wife having to handle 3 kids. We have 3 kids under 6. All that stuff matters. And so I think it really worked out perfectly for me this year.
Do you think any of the networks express any hesitancy over the fact that like you're still open about being interested in playing? Like if you were hired by a network to do game stuff, do you think they would have required or requested that you make a more of a commitment to them and give up on that possibility of or interest of playing again?
I don't think so. I didn't have any pushback at all. I think it was very just like very fluid. Obviously, these networks move at their own pace. The free agency period for sports media hiring is much different than the free agency period for the NFL. The NFL is, hey, March 16th or 20th, whatever it was this year. You know exactly where you're going on that date, and you know how much money it's for. It's completely different in the sports media world because CBS might be way more behind than Fox, who had the Super Bowl this year. Fox got a late jump on a lot of people because they had Super Bowl, Daytona, all these things. So it was a really good learning experience for me. And at the end of the day, I'm just going to end up being myself. And I think for the most part, they were like, hey, listen, we totally understand. But I do want to make this clear. I said, hey, listen, if I do get one of these jobs, I am fully committed because it's a job I can have for 30 years.
Right. You never did Hard Knocks, right?
No.
Did you have you spoken to players that did it? Did they mind the cameras being around? Did it seem like a hassle to deal with?
Well, I think, was it 2020 where they did it, Rams and Chargers, right?
Yeah.
2021 maybe. Yeah. So Justin and the whole team that I was on the year before was on it, and it was all right. Like it was more so they felt like it really wasn't intrusive, although in meeting rooms, they do have those cameras right up in the top corner. And they were like, maybe we weren't, cussing as much, or maybe we weren't telling as many jokes that we might have told if the cameras weren't in there. But for the most part, it doesn't seem to be that much of an issue. And even for the Jets this year, right? Like the Jets got final say on editing because that's sort of how you have to go about it. These are all 32 teams are very secretive. They want nothing out there that will put them at a disadvantage. You look at the show on Netflix, Quarterback, right? Peyton Manning's having a very difficult time finding, even 2 or 3 more quarterbacks to do it. Although I thought the show was awesome. And I thought that even Patrick Mahomes was like, hey, Andy Reid has final say on what's shown. They still showed a good bit of stuff. And honestly, being a quarterback in those rooms, it was very, very it was real. It was really real on what these guys go through, especially like Kirk Cousins. I thought the access to his family was awesome. Some guys don't want to do it, but everyone has a number. You pay these guys enough money, they're going to do it.
Do you think that it creates another hurdle or challenge for a team to overcome? Like obviously the Jets, they did get that editorial control, like you mentioned, but they did not want to do it. Like Robert Saleh made it clear he didn't want to do it. Aaron Rodgers didn't want to do it. They were forced into it. Does Hard Knocks, in your mind, does it hinder a team's ability to make it to a Super Bowl at all, like even just a little bit?
I don't think so. I think it's all perspective. I think it's all perspective. If you let it bother you, it's going to bug you and bother you. Like the NFL is going to make someone do it. Like it's just too good of TV.
Right.
I don't see the NFL not stopping that anytime soon. So someone has to do it. And if you do get picked, I know there's all this criteria for it. If you do get picked, like just buy into it. And if you get full editorial control, then that's great. You're only showing the interesting stuff. I mean, half this stuff, it's not going to put them at a disadvantage at all. And I guess, listen, I get it. There's a lot of hearsay about these New York Jets, and they wanted to be secretive about it. But it's such a huge story. It's New York media. It's top of the top. And I thought Hard Knocks this year was really well done, even with editorial control.
Last week you launched a podcast with Trey Wingo. So how did that partnership with Trey come about?
Yeah, so Trey and I have known each other for a long time. And I even mentioned in the show, the first time I met him, I was trying to get into a Super Bowl party in 2010 at the Ice Bowl for the Super Bowl in Dallas. And I asked him, hey, can you get me and like some guys in the Super Bowl party? And all he said was, hell no. And I'm like, oh, I guess he's like not as nice as I thought he was. And I was just like, what in the world? Like, because we had talked back and forth. All he said was hell no. So we ended up talking some more and just became friends. And then in 2018, he invited me to come down or up to Bristol for 2 full days of co-hosting Golic and Wingo, which I thought was a really, really cool opportunity, especially during the playoffs. And we just felt we felt like we were a team. Like it felt really, really good. Everything matched up. The synergies matched up. Everything was good to go. And we've always been talking since that day. Hey, listen, we need to have a podcast. Like we need to have a show together because you have some old man views. I have some young man views. I'm a player. You're the stud, like OG NFL Live guy. Like I think it'd be really, really cool. And we just could never figure out a platform to host it. And I'm telling you, we stayed in touch. We played golf. And finally this year we were like, dude, this is the perfect year to do something. Podcasts are coming back in. Everyone wants to hear from you. It's going to be an interesting takes from me coming off the field. It just made a lot of sense. And so we decided to finally launch it.
Do you think you would have done the podcast with Trey if you were still playing? Like if you were in a training camp? Yeah. This season?
Yeah, I think so. The 33rd team has been so good. Just helping produce it. They're first class. I mean, they have executives from Fox that are helping with the whole process. All these people have worked in big time media before, so the show is really well done, and they make it about as easy as possible. Like we'll have a production meeting today a little bit later, and we'll film tomorrow at 9 a.m. for a Wednesday drive time release. So it's been really, really cool to see that whole process play out. So absolutely, I would have done it if I'm still playing. When
did your interest in media start? Just the fact that you said 2018 you were doing that ESPN radio thing with Golic and Wingo. Like how long in your career have you been interested in media, and like when did you was that your first the first time you ever hosted a show with Wingo?
I did Chase Chats in 2020 during the pandemic, and I had like Nick Foles, Mitch Trubisky, the head coach of the Missouri Tigers, all these different guys on for my friends. And that was really the first time I hosted it or hosted a show. And it went really well. I mean, the first show I booked, I talked to Nick Foles, and that was, if you remember, like the day before the episode came out. I mean, we hit gold with it. The day before the episode came out, he had just gotten traded from Jacksonville to Chicago with Matt Nagy. And so it was the news of the week, of the month. I mean, major salary that he had that had to get traded, that he took less. And we had him on for an hour, and he was so open about everything. We put the episode out there. Within 24 hours, it got 1 million views on Twitter. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And I'm not really into all the views and all these whatever metrics that people, but I thought it was like really cool. I'm like, oh, there's something, we got something here. Like it was a lot easier than I really thought. Like there's a difference between being interviewed like you're doing me and also running an interview. And so that's what I had to get better at. But in terms of like, have I always thought about media? it was either for me after a certain amount of years in the league, I was like, man, like I really think I could coach. Like I really want to coach, really, really want to coach. Because I think God put football in my life for a reason. And I want to be able to, like, I feel like I'm an expert at football. I don't feel like I am an expert at football. And that's something that I wanted to continue my life with. And it was one of two things. It was coaching and it was media. And the more I thought about coaching, the more I thought about how that would affect my family life, I was just like, man, no, let's just turn to media. And then I was always asked, I mean, even in 2018, we're in Bourbonnais, Illinois at training camp for the Chicago Bears. And one day, the media guy, Adam Widman for Chicago, and Brandon Faber were like, hey, we got this spoof that I think you're going to be really good at. Do you want to do it? And they were like, I was like, what do you mean? After training camp practice, they were like, hey, put on a bucket hat, put on some sunglasses, put on a Mitch Trubisky jersey, and go undercover and interview our players. I'm like, there's no way that's going to work. That's so dumb. Like, that's so dumb. Like, they're going to be able to tell who I was. Dude, it was absolute gold. If anyone hasn't seen that, like, talk about viral. Like, I was just being myself. I wasn't trying to plan it up. But, like, Mitch Trubisky signing my jersey, Matt Nagy signing my jersey, like, no clue who I am. And so, like, I've done a lot of different things like that for a lot of different teams. And, I don't think anything of it, but everyone that is in media was like, dude, that's gold. Like, you're really good at this stuff. You're really good at telling stories. You're really good at understanding what's going on. And just through that, I'm like, hey, I think this could be a lot of fun because I have a lot of experiences, but I also have a ton of stories. Like, I played 8 of the 32 coaches, a quarter of the league I've played for, even right now. So I know a lot of people in a lot of different teams. So I have a lot of inside information that necessarily isn't going to put anyone in a bad light, but also can tell people how it really is in the NFL.
So when you went to ESPN Radio for that day in 2018, did you go there thinking like this is just going to be fun for the day, or did you go there thinking like this is something that maybe I could have a future in?
I went there thinking, hey, this is something I'm going to have a future in. Let's put on a show. Like, I did my homework. It was before the divisional round games, and I think I played for all 4 or 5 teams, 6 teams that played in the divisional round that year. So I had a lot of information. So I studied my butt off, and there's a fine line for me. Like, I feel like for me, I'm an over preparer in football. But there's also, I've learned that you think a conversation can go a certain way and the guest might have it go completely opposite. You just got to roll with it and go with it. And so that's what it is with me. Like, I always want to be prepared for stuff, but I also want to make sure that I don't just get so bogged down. We have an ad read right now. Like, that's not fun. No one wants to watch that. And I think I've learned to grow in that. And then I think it went really well. And that's the feedback I got from Trey. It was like, dude, you killed it. Like, this is awesome. And that's really what started the talks with me and Trey, and then really me trying to get into the sports media world.
One of your first notable appearances with ESPN came out, ESPN the magazine, and I'm sure you remember the headline: Chase Daniel might win the Heisman, his backup could win the Super Bowl. His backup is now, I believe, a dentist, and you had a 14-year NFL career after that. So I guess was that did that headline fracture your relationship at all or anything like that? Like, is that anything that impacted you at the time? And just what do you think looking back on it now?
Yeah, that was actually hilarious. I was like, dude, ESPN wants to do this because the whole point back then, that was 2008. That was before the 2008 season. We had just finished number 4 in the nation for Missouri, and had been at number 1 before the Big 12 championship game, which we lost to Oklahoma. We were half away from playing for a national championship. So there was a lot of hoopla and notoriety going at 2008. And that was, if you don't remember, that was when Matt Castle came in that year and led the Patriots. You got to check my record, but maybe 11-5 or 12-4. That was when Tom Brady tore his ACL.
11-5.
11-5. There you go. And they were like, hey, like, Matt Castle behind Matt Leinart, like, didn't play at all, but look at this, like, taking them to the playoffs. Like, wow, like, this might be a really good headline. So we're like, yeah, let's do it. Like, me and Chase Patton are still really cool to this day. And I'm like, yeah, let's do it. So it's me and Chase Patton on a freaking ESPN I mean, ESPN magazine, like that is like so cool to me. But yeah, totally wrong on the headline though, right? Like, come on. Like I actually won a Super Bowl in 09 as a rookie and had a 14-year career. And honestly, like Chase Patton could have been that guy. Like he had all the physical tools to do it. Just didn't work out because the starter, me, never got hurt. So we never got a chance to prove it. But I thought that was pretty funny for sure.
Are there former teammates, whether college or professional, just that stick out in your mind as personalities that would make good analysts, hosts, broadcasters today?
Man, the sports media world has changed so drastically. I feel like even in the past couple years, and you take for instance, I mean Pat McAfee, right, the king, and what he's been able to do, built a show on his own, did it his way, and ESPN hired him to fill 20 hours a week on their network or whatever it is. Like it's unbelievable, and that just shows, I think, a changing of the guards a little bit. Is like, hey, there's so much emphasis now put on players getting into media because they have such a different feel for what's going on in that certain game. All these analysts, even some hosts, Nate Burleson, right? Like all these hosts that have played, like even that's the way it's moving. And I think that Pat just hit it right on. And I think what Pat did is he opened up a lot of doors for a lot of people like myself or like someone else that might be getting into the sports media world in game to be like, hey, you can do this and networks will take notice. You got to have a good personality. You got to be authentic and you got to know what you're talking about. And most importantly, you got to be entertaining. And I don't mean like some class clown out there, but you got to have good stories. You got to keep audiences' attention, all this stuff that I realize that has to do. So I think what Pat did for people, especially like myself, has been really, really cool, honestly.
You had mentioned obviously winning the Super Bowl in 2009 with New Orleans. You were Drew Brees' backup for a few seasons, two different stints also in New Orleans that you had. But did you think that he was going to be a good broadcaster? And like, are you surprised that Brees only lasted one season with NBC after he was kind of hyped up as an up and coming analyst?
Yeah, I think that I thought that he would absolutely be. I mean, most quarterbacks, right? Most quarterbacks, backup quarterbacks, they make, and you're seeing now tight ends and running backs, even with Mark Ingram, you're seeing them make more and more analysts out of these people. And what I think with Drew is I don't think he realized how much of a job it really was. Like, yeah, he was getting paid $10 million a year. But he puts it's not like he needs the money. The dude is set for life. He's got so many other ventures outside of football and media. And so he wanted to dabble in it, and it was a really good deal. And honestly, I thought he did a pretty decent job. I don't get the criticism necessarily of him. Like, yeah, you can always do better, but if you don't do a job ever and you're in a game analyst situation and then also studio and then also calling Notre Dame games the first year, that's a lot of stuff to know. That's a lot of stuff. And then also he's traveling, right? He's flying he literally lives right next door to me in the same neighborhood. And we're in San Diego. So he's flying every week. He's flying San Diego to South Bend to Connecticut for the studio show, and then all the way cross country back here. And he missed every weekend. He did that for 20 weekends. He missed every weekend with his kids, and his kids are, I think they're ninth grade, 7th grade, 5th grade, and 3rd grade. And so they're at a really big part where of their development too, of like, hey, I need dad around. Dad's been gone for 20 years. And so I think that probably weighed in on him quite a bit. And I think that's probably why he decided, hey, this just really isn't for me. But I thought for the most part, he did a pretty good job.
What about Sean Payton? Did he strike you as somebody that was fit for the media?
100%. I mean, I could tell the first day in 2009 that I walked in, he just has that like personality about him, and he has this swagger about him. Obviously, you got to know what you're talking about. He does that, but he has a way of saying it that makes you want to jump through a glass window for him and just like hit people on the way. Like he just gets you so fired up, especially in team meetings. So I think for sure, I thought he was really, really good on Fox last year. in the pregame show and just brought a different dynamic. Him and Rob Gronkowski on there were pure gold. And I think for the most part, if he didn't really love and miss the coaching and being actually a part of it, that he would have been really, really good, because he just has a certain way of saying things and a certain swagger and a certain confidence level as a fan. At least for me, I'm like, yeah, that's right. Even though the take could be completely wrong, I'm like, I believe. Yeah, I believe. So I always thought he was for sure going to have a good career in broadcasting. But obviously, I mean, these coaches now, I mean, you look at even Urban Meyer, right? He did Big Noon Kickoff for a while, went back and be like, no, I love coaching. He's retired like 4 times, you know, and everyone knows what happened in Jacksonville. But these coaches that get into it, you got to really love it, because they really miss the grind of coaching sometimes.
So did you think that Sean Payton was somebody that could have ended up being like Bill Cowher, where as the seasons and years passed by that he just ended up enjoying the life of a broadcaster too much? Or did you always know that he was definitely going to go back to coaching?
I always knew he's going to go back to coaching. He would text me even last year in Fox, like, hey, you know, there'd be some games where we have questionable clock management, you know, throughout the league or with the Chargers. He's like, what are you guys doing? Like, da, 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 da. So like, I could always tell, like for him, it was like, he wants to be a part of it. And he was always going to go back. It was like, hey, let me take a year off. Let me live in California. Let me spend a few days in time with my kids who are grown now. But I thought that he was always going to get back in.
Sorry about the dogs. We just moved into a new house, and like, so I haven't grasped yet what time the mailman's going to come or anything. And like when they're going to pop.
I got a 2-year-old screaming. I'm surprised you can't hear her.
So the Broncos lost their season opener against the Raiders Sunday afternoon. But does Payton in Denver, does that seem like a good fit to you? Or actually, I'll ask this: Does Payton with Russell Wilson seem like a good fit?
I do. I think he's the perfect guy. I think he's the perfect guy to fix Russell. And you saw it. You saw it yesterday with the games. I mean, that offense is amazing on many different levels. The biggest thing about that offense, and I was in it for 7 years, 8 years of my career, is that they're going to put you, and Sean Payton is going to put you in the exact right position. You just got to go out and make the plays. He's not going to call many difficult plays. You're not going to be in run plays against, you know, 7-man boxes where you don't have a throw answer to where you're changing the play, you're killing the play to a different play. He's going to put them in the right spot at the right time. And I think what Russell did, I thought he played really well. You know, they just obviously, you know, you start the game off with an onside kick, should have recovered it, right? Trying to get a possession. And then you miss an extra point, you miss a field goal. It's a completely different Russell Wilson than I saw last year as an analyst breaking down the film. What I love about what Russell did was he played within the offense. He didn't try to do too much. He didn't take a ton of sacks. He didn't throw an interception. He didn't turn the ball over. Those are all things that Sean preaches. And oh, by the way, he also was able to get out of the pocket, which Sean wanted him to do, and make plays through 2 touchdowns outside of the pocket last game.
Are the Russell Wilson Drew Brees comparisons fair? Because it seems like everybody kind of assumes that Wilson is going to be Brees under Payton.
I think they're 2 completely different players. I definitely don't think you can look at it from a standpoint of being, hey, here's Russell Wilson, here's Drew Brees. They've had totally different career arcs. Russell started his career really, really good, won Super Bowls, played in Super Bowls, where Drew didn't get to the Super Bowl till 2009. They got to the NFC Championship game in 2006, Sean Payton's first year. But Drew was like he was the 32nd pick in the draft, which was round 2. It wasn't round 1 back then because there wasn't 32 teams.
Right.
And so that put a chip on his shoulder, and he was always having to work. They drafted Phillip Rivers early in San Diego. He had Doug Flutie. He was always competing for his job. Then in 2005 had that massive, everyone knows about it, the shoulder injury. And then 2006, he built it up, and everyone knows what he did with the Saints going forward with that. But I think it's 2 totally different career arcs. I don't think it's fair to compare them. But what I like about Russell right now is that he had a really, really difficult year on multiple levels last year. And I think that Sean came in and was just like, all this is out the door. All your trainers, all your offices, you're part of the team. We're doing this thing the right way. Trust in me, and I'll build you up to what we're going to be. And I think they're going to be really competitive this year.
I know you mentioned earlier that kind of weighing the coaching versus media, but, just wanting to make sure you stay in football. Have you spoken to teams about possibly joining as an assistant coach ever?
Yeah, I got interviewed or asked to interview for a few quarterback coach jobs this year when people thought like, hey, we sort of some of these people that I know around the league were like, hey, are you going to play? Do you want to get into coaching? I think you're going to be a really good coach. And I just turned them down because at the end of the day, like it was just too much time. I mean, my family. I mean, I saw my kids. I saw my kids the last 2 years, 10 hours a day during season. Or 10 hours, sorry, 10 hours a week.
10 hours, yeah.
10 hours a week. And to me, I love my family too much. Like I put that, like, family's first for me. Like faith, family, then football. And if I would have taken a coaching job, I would have never seen my kids. Like my priorities would have been out of whack. And so while I was really thrilled for the opportunity maybe to maybe get into coaching, I just think it was too much. And now I'm at home, I'm making lunches, I'm making breakfast, I'm taking my kids to school. Like I missed out on all that for a long time. So I'm really happy with where I'm at right now.
What did you think about Sean Payton calling out Nathaniel Hackett earlier this summer? Obviously, you mentioned that you called out Nathaniel Hackett last year, but Payton being his successor in Denver got a lot more attention.
Yeah, that got a ton of attention, right? And people want to say that he broke the coaches like realm of like, hey, this is how coaches should act. Like, guys, at the end of the day, Sean Payton is going to be Sean Payton, and he's going to be very blunt, very honest, and he's very black and white. And honestly, like I appreciate that. Like, yeah, maybe he said some things he walked back on and whatever. I don't think he even should have walked back on it. I think he said what he meant. So own it and move on. And I think that's sort of what he did. And to be honest, like I don't see many lies in what he said. I mean, just to be completely honest, and probably could have said it a different way, probably came off wrong. USA Today got it, all this. I mean, so it got a lot of play, especially with New York. Anything New York media is going to get a lot of play. But I think his team respected him. And he, at the end of the day, he was sending a message to his team.
Why do you think he ended up walking it back? Because I feel like it got a lot of attention, and there were a lot of people like saying that he broke the coach's code and everything like that. But honestly, once he said it, I feel like the damage was done. At that point, the apology, nobody like looks at what happened and says, "Oh, all is forgiven," now that he apologized.
Yeah, I mean, I think probably that the PR and communications people with the team, and quite possibly the owners, may have gotten involved. And honestly, he probably could have been like, man, this was probably a mistake on how I said it. Yeah. I probably could have referenced it a different way. But yeah, what he said it, and it was done. So, I mean, I think it was probably to cover your tracks a little bit for the apology.
You played for Sean Payton. You played for Andy Reid. Who's the better offensive coach?
I mean, better offensive coach. That's tough because you look at what Andy Reid's done, especially because I was there in KC in 2013, his first year. So Andy Reid, you look at what he's been able to do, especially the last 5 years. The Chiefs have gotten to the AFC Championship and Super Bowl like the past 5 years, right? Like it's been an insane run. Well, I was there the first year he was there in 2013. They traded for Alex Smith. They signed me in free agency, and they completely rebuilt the team. They were 2-14 the year before. We won our first 9 games, right? And talk about a crazy, amazing turnaround. Like it's been awesome. And I think it's like tomato. I think you're comparing the same realm of coaches together. I think with Sean Payton, it's truly like, hey, this is what we're going to do. And we're going to do it right. And we're going to build an offense almost every single week that attacks the weaknesses of defenses that we're playing. And I think you look at Andy Reid, and what I think Andy Reid does really well is that he puts his offense in, and it's his offense. He might have some more plays. They call it green dots for each week, but there's a lot of the offense that stays the same. They might just formate it differently or personnel wise it differently. So it lets players play fast. So it's two completely different coaching styles, in my opinion, and both very successful.
I want to just go around the league a little bit before I let you go. So what was the biggest surprise to you in week one? Like, who did you watch and say, whoa, like I was not expecting them to look this good?
I mean, if anyone says other than the Cleveland Browns, then they're wild to me, because the Cleveland Browns, right? Like, no one expected anything about them. No one was talking about them. And I know they've had Cincy's number in the past couple years, but Jim Schwartz is looking in the first week. I'm not about overreactions. It's looking like the best coordinator hire so far in the cycle, because I mean, Joe Burrow threw for less than 100 yards, less than 50% completion percentage. And I know he didn't play. And I know, in the past week one, he's struggled. He threw five. He had five turnovers last in 2022, start of the year in week one, and obviously missed the last three preseasons. But what they were able to do, I mean, they straight up bullied Cincy, and a lot of people have Cincy, including myself, going really far, almost to the Super Bowl. And I know it's just week one, but I think Cleveland, what they were able to do, they made, in my opinion, the most noise in week one.
What about the biggest disappointment?
I mean, the Giants, right? I mean, like, it was the perfect storm, right? And the Giants got by last year winning double-digit games and should have lost about 6 of those double-digit games. And this year, early in the year, it was sort of a trap game for them. Like, Dallas, that defense is like legendary. I think they're going to be the best in the league. And then, I mean, their defense and special teams, if you start them on fantasy, I mean, a blocked field goal for a touchdown, like week one, like what? Like, what is going on? So I think I don't want to overreact and say Dallas is the best team in the NFC, because I think that's Philly, but I do think that the Giants are going to be fine. I think it was a tough draw in the rain in New York opening week. I just think the Cowboys came off the bus ready to play, but I would definitely say the Giants probably.
What is Daniel Jones? And like, I mean, he's not the reason the Giants lost 40-0 to the Cowboys Sunday night, but he didn't help either. So did the Giants give a lot of money to a really good quarterback this season, or is Daniel Jones an average, maybe even below average starting quarterback making a lot of money?
I think he's above average, and I think you look at $55 million is the number, right? He's making 40. Am I correct? So to me, that's average salary for a starting quarterback. I don't know what he's making. You might need to check me on that, but he's making around that 40, 41 number. And that's just average middle of the pack now, which is insane. Cause I remember back in 2017, maybe, when Drew signed a $25 million a year deal, and it was like, oh my gosh, he's $100 million quarterback. Now, I mean, Joe Burrow, $55 million a year. It's insane. But I do think Daniel Jones, I think he, in that offense with Mike Kafka and Dayball, I think he's going to make strides even this year. I think last year he showed a lot of people what he could be. Now, he threw 15 touchdowns, only 5 interceptions, but he ran the ball for over 700 yards and some touchdowns. But I do think they still have one of the best 1-2 punches in Darren Waller and Saquon Barkley out there. I do think they need to find another legit receiver outside, but I wouldn't be one to worry too much about the Giants. I think that defense under Wink Martindale is going to be a lot better than they were last night, and they're going to win. They're going to win double-digit games this year, I think.
Is Dak Prescott capable of taking the Cowboys to a Super Bowl? And in a sort of weakened NFC, are there any excuses for him to not take the Cowboys to a Super Bowl?
Well, I think that was the most disappointing part of last night's game, is not necessarily the play of Dak Prescott. What I think was, once they got up to that big lead, you didn't really see Dak needing to do anything to win the game in a wet, rain-soaked game.
Bad weather.
And so that to me is like, well, I can't take away anything at all from that Dallas offense. People are like, hey, break down this. There's really nothing to take away. Yeah, it was great. They made some good plays. They ran the ball. Brandon Cooks had 2 targets. Like, CeeDee Lamb had 3. Like, it just, there wasn't a lot going on. It was their defense that stole the show. So I think the jury's still out. I think Dak, if he can, not turn the ball over, and everyone wants to make a lot about his 15 interceptions last year. Okay, well, I broke it down. 9 to 10 of them were not his fault. Tips, drops, slip receivers, all sorts of stuff like that. So I'm not necessarily worried. What I am interested to see as the first 3 or 4 weeks progress on the season is how this offense, is it going to look different than Kellen Moore? And how is it going to look different? I think that answer, you didn't learn anything about that last night.
What did you make of the Trey Lance trade to Dallas? And do the 49ers deserve more credit for finding Brock Purdy or ridicule for missing on Lance?
Oh, that's a great question. Listen, I think with quarterbacks in general in drafts, it is such a crapshoot. Like, you have no idea what you're doing. You can give up the franchise, which the San Francisco 49ers did for Trey Lance, and then you can make a pick that's Mr. Irrelevant that you think you know, but you have no clue. And he becomes the guy who's won all his regular season starts this year or last year and this year.
Yeah.
I mean, it's unbelievable. And so there's such a fine line. Like, you can think you know everything about a guy, and sometimes when that guy steps on the field, it just isn't hitting for him. I think it's really good for Trey Lance for a fresh start. He can go in, be the 3 right now, push Cooper Rush to be the 2. But I think this is a good, just like, hold on, wait, let's just go. I think Dallas gave up a decent round pick for him based on what he's done. And the sample size is so small. He's never really gotten a full, I mean, how many games did he play? 2 or 3 last year before he got hurt? You just really didn't know what he was able to do. And I think the jury's still out on him.
Russell Wilson or Matthew Stafford, which veteran quarterback looked better on Sunday, and which one, say, has a better chance of winning comeback player of the year?
Oh, Matthew Stafford. I mean, I saw 5 or 6 throws that I was just like, as a quarterback, even, I'm like, holy crap. Like, the dude, I mean, I think the Rams aren't getting enough talk about what they also did in week 1. I mean, they go into Seattle, beat a playoff team in their division, and they beat them really handily. I mean, they had 400 something yards of offense. Matthew's looking like a spry young guy, and Puka has 10. Like, I'm like, who is this Puka guy? Like, and then now he's going to be drafted by all these fantasy teams. And so that's the best thing about these early season games is you may think you know something going into week 1, and then you have a completely different view coming out of week 1. But I think Matthew Stafford had a really good week 1.
Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, Anthony Richardson. It's only 1 week, so I'm not going to make you redraft them, but which rookie starting quarterback do you think has the best chance of being a franchise quarterback?
Well, it's too early to tell for all of them. I was really impressed with Anthony Richardson, what he was able to do. Shane Steichen, the game plan, the quarterback run game, the quarterback power, zone read, RPOs. They made him seem really comfortable in that offense, and it's just too bad because they were really close in the game and just wasn't able to pull it off. Bryce Young looked like a rookie. CJ Stroud looked like a rookie too. But that's a tough test going on the road at Baltimore to try and, especially against that defense. Everyone's blitzing everywhere, right? Like, it's very difficult task. But I do think that I really like the upside for CJ Stroud, and the reason is because I really like that offense. Bobby Slowick came from San Fran, a Shanahan disciple. I know Coach Shane Day, who's the pass game coordinator down there. He was with us the last few years. That offense gets people wide open, along with the run game, and they were able to run for over 100 yards on that Ravens. So I think the later the season goes and the more comfortable that CJ Stroud gets, I think he's going to have a heck of a year.
And I'll ask kind of the same question, but we'll throw Jordan Love into the mix. Obviously not a rookie, but were you impressed with Aaron Rodgers' successor on Sunday?
I mean, yeah, what's not to be? I mean, he put a show on, in my opinion, was very efficient with the ball, made plays, made throws. Everyone saw that one where he fumbled the snap, goes up and throws this, it was unbelievable. And I think that, with Jordan Love, and that's something I said at all my early season talks and podcasts was like, hey, Jordan Love, it's just not a sample size, right? He played last year in Philly. He played in preseason. He played well. But I think he's continuing to take that next step. I think the years sitting were really good for him. And I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I think that LaFleur's offense, it's going to be actually LaFleur's offense. It's not going to be Aaron Rodgers and LaFleur's offense. He's going to go back to the Shanahan days, the San Francisco type days, all those days of, hey, this is what I really want it to look like and feel like. And Jordan Love, if you can just run my offense, we're going to be really successful.
Awesome. Chase, you were great. Enjoy the NFL season. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
That is Chase Daniel. I'm Brandon Contes. This is the Awful Announcing Podcast. Please rate and subscribe to this podcast. Please also subscribe to Awful Announcing's YouTube page. But regardless of how you consume Awful Announcing and the Awful Announcing Podcast, thanks for listening and be good.
Thanks for listening to the Awful Announcing Podcast. For the latest news spanning the sports media landscape and more, check out awfulannouncing.com and follow us at Awful Announcing.